И снова здравствуйте, мои уважаемые зрители.
Hello again, my dear viewers. In Our Yard, March 30th continues in today's traditional daily summary of what is happening on the front line. And before moving on to it, I want to explain some of the nuances. The fact is that I thought you noticed that not only from me, but also from other sources recently, namely on operational information, on the movement of troops, on who, where is it coming, and what did it take? It has become much smaller, an order of magnitude less. And this is due, among other things, to the fact that, for example, the press service of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has dramatically changed its policy over the past week about the movement of Russian troops in the last week, but this does not mean that this movement does not exist. I will give just one example. Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, for example, did not talk about that Russian troops took control of the village of Kamenka, south of Izium, and also Dry Kamenka, which is located even more south than Kamenka itself, towards Slavyansk. Nevertheless, if we look carefully at the penultimate report of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, 4:00 hours this morning, we will see that the Russian troops, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, these settlements have already been taken. I base my data not only on the data of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which, in my opinion, and from experience, are traditionally late by a couple of days, and according to what the audience writes to me. In fact, today this is the most powerful information resource that allows you to understand the situation as a whole. And according to the data that they gave me, the front today, along Kramatorsk, passes just south of the border of the Kharkov and Donetsk regions. There was shelling of Kristish, but further, the Russian army does not go yet. That is, there was an operational pause. Well, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said correctly, Russian troops, having achieved serious success, clear their rear areas, regroup, and prepare for the next strike. That is, in general, the task of initially creating a bridgehead for a further strike around the Slavic, Kramatorsk grouping, was completed by the Russian troops in this sector. And now we should expect a very powerful serious blow around Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and towards those troops who are attacking right now from the Gorlovka region. You know, residents of Gorlovka, they wrote to me today. Yuri, you know, I woke up, a man accustomed to shelling, but I woke up from terrible cannonade. Thunder stands, the earth shakes, they shoot from all calibers. Self-propelled guns, multiple launch rocket systems, and all this flies in the direction between New York and Avdiivka, in the place where the Russian troops and the troops of the Donetsk People's Republic are trying to break through the front line, 95 brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Moreover, it seems that 2 Iskanders flew there tonight, or in the morning, which suggests that this direction is today considered a priority for the Russian command. In fact, breaking through this line of defense is a priority. And a quick breakthrough of this front line, or the rest of the front line, with a corresponding blow from Izium, he immediately threatens with encirclement, and in the future with the defeat of the Slavic, Kramatorsk, Lysychansk, and also Bakhmutovskaya grouping of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. That is a huge cauldron, which will be further destroyed. And, accordingly, further defeat in this area will lead to the next offensive operation, already encircling the Avdiivsko-Donetsk grouping of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, with access to the Pokrovsk region from the direction of Huliapol. And accordingly, Izium, that this morning, at least in the Gorlovsky direction. This is the most powerful strategic offensive operation in the east. At the edge has already begun. And this, in fact, at the moment, is the most important news from the front line. All other news is, to some extent, secondary. Let's go over them briefly. South, there are fights in the north of the Kherson region. Krivorozhskaya, the group of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, taking advantage of the fact that part of the forces has been withdrawn and transferred to the Zaporozhye direction, is trying to move south She took control of several settlements, but in general, this is still considered not terrible. Russian troops keep parts of the armed forces of Ukraine under serious fire control. In the area of Nikolaevsky, a fortified area, they inflict constant missile strikes on him, and those parts that are put forward somewhere and fall into the slot of the sight of Russian unmanned aerial vehicles. Appropriate artillery and airstrikes are applied to them. The situation looks like this here, something like this. Kiev, near Kiev, Chernihiv. Also, the intensity of the fighting, in general, near Kiev, subsided. Near Chernihiv, note, the activity of the armed forces of Ukraine was noticed in the south of the Sumy region. And the nature of the movement of the Ukrainian armed forces in this area suggests that Kiev is preparing a deblocking strike in the direction towards Chernihiv. Well, also, tonight there was another shelling of the territory of the Belgorod region from long-range rocket launcher systems. That for the inhabitants of the Belgorod region has now become commonplace. Well, a couple of words in the end about Zaporozhye, the direction. 2. Noted one interesting detail of a few days ago in the area of Huliapol. In general, the leadership of the armed forces of Ukraine, so to speak, showed a certain optimism. Even tried to attack some settlements. For the second day already, they are burning about the fact that Russian troops are constantly shelling the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. And they make local counterattacks. All this suggests that here, too, the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine is gradually beginning to worsen. Which is also understandable because it is from this area, a little to the east, that a new powerful blow is being prepared to encircle the southern part of the Donbass Front. This is what I can say at the moment. Approximately at 12:00 Moscow time, March 30th. That's all for now.
На этом пока все.